Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this video that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video, I believe, by that of ESPN First Take. And Stephen A. Smith and whoever else is going to be on this segment. They're, of course, recently going to be talking about the fights that ended up happening this past weekend, but especially that of the Terrence Bud Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. fight, where Terrence Bud Crawford proved that he was even more of the truth than that of Mr. Errol Spence Jr. So, of course, for those of you that did not end up watching the fight, not only was Terrence Bud Crawford able to beat that of Mr. Errol Spence Jr., but he was pretty much able to completely mollywop him all over the place. Like I said, I think that the first 3 rounds were decently competitive. I think that the first round I gave to Errol Spence Jr. The second round, of course, went to Terrence Bud Crawford because of the knockdown. But I thought that, there was still a relative chance that Errol Spence could get back up on the horse and make it somewhat competitive, even though ever since that knockdown, I was probably favoring Crawford to win the fight. In the third round, a lot of people gave it to Crawford. I believe that I gave it to Spence, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to rewatch the fight because the pay-per-view that I bought on the Showtime app, they were not showing the replay, unfortunately. So I can't really tell you, by rewatching it, who I thought won the third round, at least off of that of the Showtime app. But anyways, pretty much every round after that of round 3, it was really not even close to competitive. And now the big question is about Mr. Errol Spence Jr. is that where does he go from here? Because Errol Spence Jr., of course, was recognized as one of the world's best all-around fighters and best all-around boxers. Not just best all-around athletic boxers, but also one of the more intelligent and also one of the more complete boxers in the world. Now, I had certain people in my comment section say that they didn't think that Errol Spence Jr., that he was really that great of a fighter. I've even had certain people go as far to say that they believe that there should have been other fighters ahead of him on the pound-for-pound list, and that the reason why Spence was a little bit more propelled to the top was because he was a black American fighter. And I can somewhat get, the narrative there when it comes down to it. But at the end of the day, in my view, Errol Spence was a debatable top 5 pound-for-pound fighter within the past several years. At the end of the day, he defeated Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, Kell Brook, Yordenis Ugas, Mikey Garcia, and he defeated them in a way that no one else had. Now, of course, if you want to maybe say, well, Mikey Garcia, he was coming up from 2 weight classes, okay, that's a little bit understandable. But even against Yordenis Ugas, no one had ever looked that dominant against Yordenis Ugas. I mean, I think Ugas maybe won 1 round, and that was round 4, or whenever he, knocked out Errol Spence Jr.'s mouthpiece. Every other round, Errol Spence completely battered him to hell. I mean, he completely tore him to shreds. Against Danny Garcia, I thought that he clearly won around 9 rounds to 3, 8 rounds to 4. It was the most dominant loss that Danny Garcia had ever took. And he had fought in fighters like Lucas Matisse, Amir Khan, Keith One Time Thurman, Sean Porter, and a few other fighters, Robert Guerrero. And he made Danny Garcia, basically have the worst loss of his career, the most embarrassing loss of his career. Again, Sean Porter, he ended up getting knocked down for the second time in his career, I believe, in those final 3 rounds. And I thought he clearly won 8 rounds to 4. Bottom line is this. And then, of course, you talk about the Kell Brook fight. Bottom line is this. I would not go with the narrative that Errol Spence was just a guy that was more hyped than what he was actual substance. Errol Spence was a very great fighter. He was a very good fighter. But the big question is about Mr. Errol Spence is, after this fight, first of all, where would he rank on my top 10 pound-for-pound list? And that's a good question because I'm not really sure. Because he certainly cannot be top 5 anymore. Certain people, of course, would argue, well, since he's a top 5, since he was a former top 5 pound-for-pound fighter and he lost to a guy that many people already debated as the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter, at least possibly, couldn't you say that he maybe could still remain there? In my view, there's just no chance. And the reason why that is because both of these fighters were looked at as the same size. Terrence Bud Crawford was actually looked at as the slightly smaller in stature man, besides that of the arm reach. And Errol Spence, once again, he got his ass kicked worse than Deontay Wilder did in the trilogy fight against Tyson Fury. So I don't see that there's a chance that he's still top 5 pound per pound. The question is he still even top 10 pound per pound? And that's, possibly for me and other people to decide a little bit later on. I'm not sure. At least for my own personal list. For my own personal list. Of course, I don't control any other list. But, I would have to take a look at it. Right now, I'm not quite so sure if he does. In terms of his career, which is probably even the grander question, what does this mean for his career? That's going to be a very interesting question. That's going to be a very interesting proposition because where does he really go from here? Errol Spence Jr. once upon a time was one of the top boxers in the world, and he just got completely dominated. He didn't just lose or even lose a decision. He got completely dominated, and he got knocked down three separate occasions in this fight. And I have no doubt about it that had the fight went on, there's a possibility that he could have been sleeping on the floor. I have no anyways, at least huge doubt about that. Errol Spence took a very bad loss, and whenever you have a fighter that had that level of confidence and they get stopped in that fashion, especially when they were looked at as top five pound for pound or one of the best fighters in the world, they're never usually mentally ever the same again. Whether you talk about Deontay Wilder, whether you want to talk about Roy Jones Jr. when he lost to Antonio Tarver, whether you want to talk about some other fighters that ended up getting knocked out in that fashion, especially a fight that was looked at either as winnable for them or that they were favored in or that was looked at as a 50-50 fight when it came down to it. So like I said, we'll see what happens. Even certain fighters that did have a very close fight, whether they won or lose, they were never the same after certain fights like that. Again, take a look at Gennady Golovkin after that second fight against Canelo Alvarez. And that was a fight that could have went either way, but I thought that Canelo Alvarez just edged it. Gennady was never the same after that. That took years off of his career. So the question is, Errol Spence now at 33 years old and suffering the ass whooping that he recently just suffered, and I say that in no derogatory meaning, but there's just no other way to put it. Where does his career go from here? Let's see what Stephen A. Smith and let's see what these guys have to say.
As that UFC 291 did not disappoint, how about Justin Gaethje getting revenge, head kick KO of Dustin Poirier in this?
Just to talk about that UFC 291 card, Dustin Poirier, I knew he was going to lose as soon as I seen him in the first round, and I predicted Dustin Poirier to win that fight. But he was not defending the left hook at all. He was not cross-blocking like what he needed to. He was not shoulder rolling as what he needed to. He was just standing way too close in the range. And like I said, it was very clear to me that Dustin did fear Justin Gaethje's power, but he knew that coming into the fight. He knew that he was a hard hitter. But what screwed Dustin up is that he did not think Justin Gaethje was going to be quite as technical this time as what he was overall compared to last time. Because last time he was kind of running into his shots. As soon as I seen him defend, some of those things, or quote-unquote defend some of those strikes, I already knew he was going to lose that fight. I didn't think it was going to be by a head kick necessarily, but I knew eventually Justin Gaethje was going to get him. And even if a trilogy fight does end up happening, I'm not quite sure if Dustin Poirier is ever going to be the same again after that knockout. Both of these guys are 34 years old.
Second round to win the BMF belt. Stephen A., were you surprised with Gaethje's performance?
Somewhat. I expected one of them to get knocked out. I thought Poirier would win. He beat him years ago. I know that Gaethje is sensational. He got knocked out.
And I believe that Poirier is probably still the all-around more talented fighter. I think that he's a better boxer than Justin Gaethje, and I just think that he's a better all-around fighter. I think that he's even debatably better on the ground. But Dustin Poirier, at the end of the day, he had his jab taken away, and the strategy of Justin Gaethje ended up winning. And perhaps he's a little bit more technical than what some of us think. And that's not me saying that Justin Gaethje does not have technical ability. He does. He showed it against Tony Ferguson. He showed it against other fighters. It's just that against the elite of the elite fighters, he usually ends up not showing quite out as good. So, it is what it is. But very good on Justin Gaethje for getting that revenge knockout. And I'm not sure if Dustin is ever going to be the same again after that fight.
Power in both hands, and if there was going to be a knockout, I thought it would be with his fist.
There goes Jorge Masvidal, one of the most overrated UFC fighters of the past 10 plus years.
Kick, and if you could see the footage when with the still shot, Dustin is blocking it, but misses like by an inch and gets caught on the back of his end. Basically, it put him out. That could happen in the UFC. Anything could happen at any particular moment. See, look, he's got his arm up to block it, but it's still squeezed in there. And just that nugget, that little bit of space, was what ultimately ended up catching him, and that was enough to finish, because obviously get caught with a flying kick, I mean, that's something else, man.
Yes, and one thing for those of you that have ever competed in that of MMA, when it comes down to it, or for those of you that have ever trained, or for those of you that have ever gotten advice from anyone that's ever trained. One thing my father, who competed a little bit in mixed martial arts, he said that kicks are twice as powerful as that of punches. You know, just is what it is. So even though Dustin Poirier, even though he was able to block it a little bit, it was just able to get around the guard just by a slight bit. And I've seen kicks before in the UFC and MMA, even when they do block that kick, but it's just so powerful that there's just not much that you can do. So really the best way to try and not get knocked out by a kick is to try and control the distance and to make sure that you just don't run into it in the first place. For those of you that remember Lyoto Machida, the great, I believe, Japanese descent, former UFC light heavyweight champion from Brazil, he had a similar knockout, I believe, over a Filipino fighter by the name of Mark Munoz several years ago.
To Gaethje, showing that in his arsenal, because we know that brother can punch, but he can kick too, evidently.
And both these guys always put on a show. All right, let's go from the octagon to the boxing ring now, where one of the most anticipated fights of late was way more lopsided than expected, Stephen A. So Terrence Crawford put on a dominant display versus Errol Spence Jr., dropping him in round 2 and twice more in round 7 before he stopped him on his feet in the 9th on a one-side.
I gotta say this, out of all the knockdowns that ended up happening, the uppercut was probably the most out of nowhere, at least in my view. Not necessarily that, I don't expect Terrence Bud Crawford to throw uppercuts, but he did hurt Terrence a little bit there, at least from what it looked like. He got a little bit eager. But the one that really surprised me was the one after that, when he ended up just blasting Errol Spence with that right hook. That's when I was like, God damn. Terrence Bud Crawford, I don't know, I don't know overall what special water he drank, but this motherfucker, this dude looked like Superman in that ring that night. And by no means am I alleging that he took steroids. I'm just saying that the man looked absolutely phenomenal. Like I said, the power was just crazy.
Crawford moves to 40-0 with 31 knockouts in his career. This mega fight determined the first ever undisputed welterweight champion of the 4-belt era. Crawford connected on 50% of his punches thrown and knocked Spence down 3 times, Bud's most knockouts in a match since 2019. Stephen A.
Well, as it says right there, Terrence Bud Crawford landed, I believe, at about 50% of his punches. That's not supposed to happen in a super fight of this magnitude, at least an alleged super fight. Now, there's a lot of people saying that Errol Spence didn't necessarily look the same, and you could say that he didn't look quite as good as what he did in other fights. But was it because, once again, was it the, 1 year layoff, a little bit over a year layoff? It might have been a part of it, but is it possible that Terrence Bud Crawford is just that good? And just that much more skilled than Errol Spence to where he just didn't look anywhere near the same fighter? Because I have a hard time believing that had any other fighter been in the ring with Errol Spence Jr. that night, including Sean Porter or Danny Garcia, that they would have probably won any more than 3 to 4 rounds, just in my personal view. Because Errol Spence was giving it a competitive go within the first 3. It's just that Terrence, his speed, his foot speed, his counter punching, they were all better, which I assume they would be better. But once again, the thing that even, shocked me was that his power even seemed to be more than Errol Spence Jr.'s, which was crazy. And on top of that, he had the best defensive performance in his career. I said that he would need to have that, and he did. Terrence Bud Crawford in many other fights has been a little bit too hittable. In this fight, his defense was astonishing, or at least way, way, way more improved than what it had been in the past.
Surprised with Crawford's dominance here?
I was shocked. I thought Crawford would win the fight. I picked him to win by decision. I thought it would be close. I thought it would be epic, and it's appropriate to start off this segment by saying that Terrence Crawford has solidified, in my mind, the number one pound-for-pound fighter on the planet.
Yeah.
I interviewed him.
I agree with that. And before Stephen A. Smith continues with that, I've had certain people say, well, what about Mr. Naoya Inoue? He ended up, becoming undisputed this year, and he's more than likely going to become undisputed in a second weight division. And he's been more dominant, blah, blah, blah. Listen, if you have Inoue as your number one pound-for-pound fighter, that's up to you. I just don't personally have him there because that win that Terrence Bud Crawford has over Errol Spence Jr. is, in my view, bigger, probably a decent amount bigger than any of the wins in Inoue's career. And right now, you can't really trample all over Inoue's resume because, now that we really take a look both at Terrence Bud Crawford and Inoue, we have to really wonder, now that they pretty much stomped their 50-50 opponents, alleged 50-50 opponents, Was Donaire, possibly an A-grade fighter maybe when Inoue fought him? Was Emmanuel Rodriguez possibly an A-grade fighter when Inoue fought him? Maybe he was just that good at the end of the day, because it's not like Fulton really looked much better. I mean, he lasted longer, but he didn't really win a single round in the fight. And Errol Spence Jr., he won a couple rounds in my view, probably 1 to 2 rounds, but he didn't win any other rounds. And to be quite honest with you, there was other fighters that gave it a more competitive go. Now, is that me saying that those fighters are better than him? Absolutely not. That's just me saying that, Terrence Bud Crawford, did he really fight as many bums as maybe is what we were saying in the past? Or maybe, is he just that damn good? Now, the guys at welterweight, no, I don't believe that they were that good. But maybe I have to take a look at Gamboa and Victor Postal as A-grade level fighters. Maybe they were actual A-grade level fighters. Maybe they just ran into a fighter that was way better than we all expected.
After the fight for Sports Center, he was like, give me my respect. You damn right, bro. You got it. He has solidified himself as one of the greatest ever at the welterweight division. And we're talking about a division that once had Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy the Hitman Hearns and Roberto Duran and Wilfredo Benitez. The list goes on. Of course.
Fighters like Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Bud Crawford have already surpassed fighters like Tommy Hearns and Wilfredo Benitez, in my opinion. Those fighters never won any of their big fights. I'm sorry. Especially Tommy Hearns. I understand Tommy Hearns was one of the first 4-weight division champions, I believe. Name me a big fight that he won where the guy was able to handle his size and his level of skill. And I'm sorry, I just don't count the Roberto Duran win. I could care less. The dude was a guy that came up from 135. You outreached him by about 8 inches. On top of that, you have one punch power. Like, give me a break. It is what it is. That'd be like Deontay Wilder versus Maurice Breidis. Give me a fucking break.
Floyd Money Mayweather, an all-time great. Terrence Crawford.
And of course, Maurice Breidis, he's probably nowhere near as skilled as Roberto Duran, but you know what I mean. Tommy Hearns was supposed to win that fight. Every other fight that he was allegedly, a 50-50 matchup in that could handle his size, like Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler, he lost.
Is officially in that conversation. He is 40-0 with 32 KOs. We got to give him props, give recognition. It is what it is. He is something special. His mental state of mind, his poise, his IQ, that third eye, as Teddy Atlas would describe it as, the precision with his shots, the power behind it, and seeing things quicker than other people see it. He's just something spectacular. And to be on this big stage for the first time in his career on this level, he was absolutely positively dominant. I mean, from his opening with Eminem escorting him out, something spectacular, okay? Yeah. Having said that, here's what I want to say to the American public. Errol Spence Jr. came into the fight undefeated at 28-0 with 22 knockouts. That was an ass whipping. An ass whipping, the likes of which I have not seen on many occasions. I think about George Foreman beating Joe Frazier. I think about Floyd Money Mayweather destroying Diego Corrales.
I agree with that. When you talk about an alleged 50-50 fight, out of many other big fights in the past, there's not much bigger ass whoopings than this. I'm not really surprised, at least just taking a look back at it in hindsight. Now, I wasn't really watching boxing at the time. That was more, I believe, in the mid-2000s when that happened. That was a little bit too young or old for me. But Diego Corrales, when you really take a look at him, it's no offense, but the man is just, he's not an exceptional fighter. He never has been. He was fighting guys that, to be quite honest with you, were somewhat limited and probably a bit smaller than him. Had Diego Corrales been in a more talented weight division, I think that more than likely he probably would have got KO'd more often. But of course, that was one of Mayweather's greatest performances, probably within his top 5 performances, just in terms of how he looked. Is Diego Corrales one of his top 5 opponents ever? No. Not my personal view, because Diego Corrales is not as exceptionally skilled as some of the fighters that he fought, like a Shane Mosley, or a Miguel Cotto, or a Pacquiao, or a Marquez, or a Canelo Alvarez. He's not on the level of any of those guys. Just is what it is. And there might even be a couple of other fighters that I'm not mentioning. I'd also put Ricky Hatton over him, just on my personal view. But anyways, when it comes down to it, this fight is up there in terms of one of the biggest ass whoopings of all time, where this fight was allegedly supposed to be a 50-50 fight. I mean, it's right there with Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury 2. It's right there with Joe Frazier and George Foreman. I'm trying to think of another fight that, perhaps I can think of. It's right there with Inoue and Steven Fulton. Guillermo Rigondeaux versus Vasily Lomachenko. Also Rigondeaux versus Nonito Donaire. I'm not really sure what else to compare it to. I mean, it's up there, man. It's up there as one of the biggest ass kickings I've ever seen.
Floyd Mayweather destroying
Roy Jones Jr. versus James Toney.
Arturo Gatti, Felix Trinidad at the Garden, walking through and destroying William Jaffe. In all my years of watching boxing, it is rare that I've seen an ass whipping like that. Having said that, I want to announce this on national television right here on First Take. I believe that Errol Spence Jr. should consider retirement. That's how bad that ass whipping was. Let me explain why.
One loss.
And I'm getting ready to go to that.
Molly Karam said something where she said it's just one loss, and I'm not really sure if she was saying that, basically saying calm down, Steve, or maybe she was just saying it to say, maybe that for the viewers, that way Stephen A can explain his point. Listen, I would understand both sides, but you know what? I do truly get I do truly get Stephen A. Smith's point. Errol Spence Jr., man, he looked really bad after that knockout loss, and right after the fight, when I was taking a look at some of the commentary, I had certain people in my comment section saying that Errol Spence shouldn't fight no more, and I thought that people were kind of overreacting. But the way that I heard him after that fight, he was slurring his words really bad. He couldn't hear very well. He just was not reacting extraordinarily well. Now, that of course could just be a concussion, which I guarantee you it's very possible that he has. But man, that's a pretty brutal that's a pretty brutal way to go out.
It's how you lose, and it's what he's been through. Oscar De La Hoya is the one who deserves the most prop. And I know Swagoo is not in this segment with me, but I know he's listening. Oscar De La Hoya deserves props. Oscar De La Hoya was the one that tweeted before the fight to remind us all. There was a car accident that Errol Spence Jr. was in 2019.
Yep.
The Ferrari turned over numerous times. He was ejected from the vehicle because he wasn't wearing his seatbelt. And they tried to say there was no facial fractures or anything like that. But his jaw and his teeth had major damage, okay? Oscar De La Hoya pointed out nobody has tested that. Nobody has been in a position to test that. But we know Crawford can. What's going to happen when Crawford hits him in that jaw? Remember, not only did he get into that accident in 2019, which I continuously lamented may be a problem, 3 months later, he revealed he was also rear-ended. A couple of years later, a 14-year-old stole his mama's vehicle, drove in a car, ran a red light, and he was in an accident because of that. That's 3 car accidents.
This motherfucker just can't avoid car accidents. I mean, shit, he can't even try to avoid a car accident. Good Lord. In all seriousness, overall, that is very unfortunate. And some people, I've heard say behind the scenes, because certain athletes, they do go under certain things behind the scenes. There are certain people that believe that that's just not by coincidence. But I'll just leave it at that.
With all of this facial damage, okay? You got that. You have him having to leave the game for a year because he had a detached retina in his left eye as he was preparing to fight Manny Pacquiao. You have that going on, okay? And of course, because of the car accident, the leg injury. When you consider the multitude of injuries outside of the ring that he had, combined with what he experienced Saturday night, I got Teddy Atlas on the phone telling me there should be a commission that doesn't even allow Errol Spence Jr. to fight for at least the next year because of the beating he took. This Teddy Atlas has been used to train Mike Tyson. This Teddy Atlas is an analyst, boxing analyst extraordinaire for us, who's been covering the sport for over 50 years.
Yeah.
This man is saying he doesn't even need to fight for another year at the very least because of the beating he took. And Errol Spence Jr. is talking about moving up to 154, which Terrence Crawford will invite, to go against him in December. After that, I consider that, Swagoo, tantamount to Tua Tagovailoa being on the field concussed against Buffalo, But him still being left in the game and then coming back on a Thursday night
December?
to play against Cincinnati, and obviously they had to carry him out in an ambulance. He shouldn't have been on that field for that Thursday night game. This to me is tantamount to that. December is too soon.
Yeah, 5 months.
Listen, I understand it was Terrence Crawford, and I get it because he is spectacular. He's the best in the world right now. But the beating was so severe. It was bad, Molly. It was bad.
And I agree with a lot of what Stephen A. Smith is saying, and this is what I was also saying with Deontay Wilder, but a lot of his pro-blackity-black fans, they showed overall, once again, no intelligence whatsoever, and on top of that, really, they said that they cared so much for Deontay Wilder, when really, in reality, they really didn't. Because if you really cared for Deontay Wilder, you would have said, listen, dude, you got to take a little bit of a break. You got to reflect on your loss a little bit, and you got to try to improve. You just got knocked the fuck out when it comes down to it in that second fight. You got to get back in the groove, try to face Andrew Ruiz, try to face, overall some of these other dudes. Joe Joyce, try to face some of those guys. Get a new trainer, get a new corner, when it comes down to it, and then try to come back. Maybe later on you can get that Tyson Fury fight. But these guys wanted that reality of Tyson Fury cheating so bad that they didn't care that Deontay Wilder possibly was going to suffer even more brain damage when it came down to it in that third fight. And they said, get back in the ring for us, Deontay, because you represent us pro-blackity blacks. Get in the ring for us, Deontay Wilder, and prove us right, and beat that big lump of a Caucasian man that we hate so much. Once again, those people, they didn't give a shit about Deontay Wilder. If you gave a shit about Deontay Wilder, you would have told him the truth.
You had people ringside like, stop this fight. It was bad.
Yo,
Go ahead, Swagger.
Man, listen. So, y'all know I live in the Dallas area.
Yes.
And Errol Spence is a hero
Yes, he
in this
is.
community.
I love him.
The things that he's done. This whole state, let alone city, was with Errol Spence through and through. Now, I thought Crawford would win the fight as well. But let me say this, Stephen A., because somebody asked me on Twitter after the fight, when he said, hell yeah, he won a rematch when he was being interviewed. And I was thinking to myself, I know this is right after a fight where you've took a major beating, but Stephen A., I did not like the way he was sounding.
I didn't like it either. And I pretty much agree with whoever the dude is here, Errol Spence. And listen, he's always been known to slur his words a little bit. He just talks like that, He has that Southern Texan accent where sometimes it feels like he combines words together that shouldn't be combined. And he kind of has that slow biscuits and gravy accent. Listen, all that's well and good. I don't like the way that he sounded either. I noticed a complete difference overall in the way that he was talking, even from his regular self. To the naked eye, who doesn't really know how Errol Spence Jr. talks, they may not necessarily know, but he looked terrible.
I did not like the slurred words. I did not like the way he was. Like, it just bothered me beyond boxing. And to your point, man, I didn't even know that about the multiple accidents. I knew about the big one that took place because the whole city.
We are gathered here on the eve of battle to protect the so-called
city was shaking up. But when you looked at that fight, right, and he was so outmatched to say that these were the two guys that everybody was waiting on. But to your point, man, I think it's about Errol's long-term health, which may already be affected. And more importantly, he's not on Crawford level.
Don't hold on, Swagger. He don't need to go near Crawford. He don't need to go near Crawford. Stay away from him. Stay away from him. And by the way, there's this brother coming up, Molly. His name is Boots Ennis. This brother's special. You don't want to go in the ring against after that beating. Molly, it was so bad. I swear to y'all, I am not exaggerating.
Yeah.
You know how I
got calls about it.
Listen, we know how I love trolling Dallas Cowboy fans. I love it. I'm cool.
Imagine you're from Dallas overall. You're a fan of Errol Spence Jr. you fucking, you're a big fan of Dallas. You live in Dallas. You get calls from friends. You see that ass whooping?
With a lot of the plays and stuff like that. Molly ain't gonna mention no names. I saw most of these Cowboys and Jerry Jones. I saw Jerry Jones before the fight. Michael Irvin, my brother, he was there going crazy, talk about Spence was going to knock him out, and then he got subdued and quiet, believe it or not. Even Michael Irvin got silent and stuff like this. And the players were there. I have seen the Cowboys, after a loss in the playoffs, look better than what they looked like Saturday night. They love this brother. They came to the fight in droves. And when I tell you, it was devastating. It's not a loss, Molly. It was an ass kicking. And I'm telling you, it was so, as bad as it looks on social media with the pictures and all of this stuff, it was so much worse in real time. It was one of the real moments you saw grown men like, yo, stop this fight. Stop this fight.
Yeah.
And at some point, the game of life is more important.
It's going to be very interesting to see where Errol Spence Jr. goes from here. And I agree, you don't really want to get back in the ring with Terrence Bud Crawford. Listen, if you're Errol Spence Jr., you might want to get back in the ring with him. I think it's either 50-50. I think there's a possibility that maybe he does. I think that there's a possibility that he doesn't. Maybe a little bit of both. But I think that his pride, of course, is going to tell him that he wants to fight that at Terrence Bud Crawford. But if you're his coach and his trainer, Derek James, you might want to, tell him to pull back a little bit and say, listen, if we do end up fighting Terrence Bud Crawford in a rematch, it might, behoove you. It might help you out a little bit to have that rematch in 1 or 2 years, where maybe we improve on some things and, you get a couple of tune-up fights, a couple of decent fights. Maybe we fight Keith Thurman, someone at 154, kind of get you back in the groove of things. It's going to be very difficult because when you have a fighter of that magnitude that so far was that dominant, like I said, fighters are conquerors. They take a look at themselves as one of the best athletes and one of the best things in the world. And they think that they can conquer everything because everything that they did before worked. So after that first loss, especially when it's a knockout loss, they're never mentally nor physically ever the same again because they're like, damn, everything that I was doing before was working. Why all of a sudden is it not working now? What do I do? What don't I do? So they never look the same again in their career because they don't have the same mindset anymore. It almost takes away a piece of their intelligence because at the end of the day, they don't know what to or not to do anymore.
And then we're talking about the head and brain injuries and all of that. It's a whole different deal.
Molly, I think Crawford actually had mercy on him.
There was another commentator who said that as well, a channel that I like to watch a whole lot, Chronicles of Judah 144. And I agree. I think that he did have a little bit of mercy on him because when Terrence Bud Crawford tapped his hand in the 7th round, do I think that would have happened had the fight been competitive? More than likely not. I didn't see him do it with Sean Porter, and Sean Porter and him apparently are very good friends. Crawford did it with Errol Spence Jr. because I think even he felt like, damn, this is supposed to be a 50-50 fight, and I'm whooping this dude's ass.
I do too.
Worse.
I was just about to say that.
Crawford had
I was just about to
mercy
say
on
that.
him.
Yeah.
It could have been what he was.
So why would fans even want to see this again in December?
Well, because they think because Errol Spence is a champion who's undefeated before Saturday night.
Yeah, no,
and
I
you're
know the
thinking,
records and all
you're
that.
thinking he can make amends. He can't possibly come back and be worse. But yes, it could be worse if he's truly damaged because of those accidents. I'm not telling he should retire because of the beating he took Saturday night. I'm saying those accidents.
The accumulation of the trauma.
De La Hoya brought it up, and we got to give Oscar De La Hoya credit as well because he pointed that out, and we didn't talk enough about the damage those car accidents did to him. It was bad. It was bad.
All right, gotta leave it there. We'll talk about it a little more on YouTube later. Still to come. Will this season be the Cowboys' best?
Please, and Oscar, his cocaine that headed up ass. Anyway, when it comes down to the overall, is it possible that the damage that was happening to Errol Spence Jr. after the car accidents, is it possible that he was never physically the same again with the jaw? Maybe, but to be quite honest with you, I don't think that I've seen that. I think that maybe if you're talking about the same Errol Spence that fought Danny Garcia, maybe. But to be honest with you, he always seemed like he had a solid jaw against those type of guys. It's not like Danny Garcia nor Yordenis Ugas didn't have any type of power. And sure, there were some times that Errol Spence was stunned, but he never looked like he was going to get barraged like what he did in this fight when it came down to it. Terrence Bud Crawford was just so slick and so smart and just so sharp in this fight when it came down to it. I have no other conclusion to come to than Terrence Bud Crawford is just that damn good. It just is what it is. And, there were certain people that said, well, this looked like the worst version of Errol Spence Jr. Is it because the worst version of Errol Spence Jr. really showed up? Or is it because Terrence Bud Crawford made him look like the worst version of himself? Like I said many times, all-time great fighters can even make other all-time great fighters look like shit. Take a look at Mayweather against Pacquiao and against Canelo Alvarez. He beat those guys with relative ease. Take a look overall at that of, I'm trying to think of who else. Take a look at George Foreman versus Joe Frazier. Take a look at Muhammad Ali versus George Foreman. Take a look at all those guys. Sometimes you're just getting in a ring with an entity that you did not know was that good. But, it is what it is. But anyways, that's pretty much about it. That's pretty much about it for this commentary. The last thing I'll say from this one commentary that I heard from a channel that I like to watch, Chronicles of Judah 144, he said something I also thought was interesting that I agree with pretty much anyone who loses, especially in professional sports, that the bad times at times can be a good thing. And that Errol Spence, he's going to truly find out who likes him for him and who doesn't. Because a lot of these guys now are going to cast him to the side. I agree with that. Certain people that were allegedly on his side, a lot of the fans that he had in Dallas, all of a sudden they're not going to have anything to do with him anymore. So we'll see what happens. Anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later, and we'll see where Errol Spence Jr. goes from here. Where do I think he should go? Well, I definitely don't think he should get in the ring with either Terrence Bud Crawford or Jerome Buchanan next. Maybe a Keith Thurman fight would be good, but, after the ass kicking that he took, he might even have to take a lesser fight. So we'll see. We'll see. But that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.